So a huge story came out the other day, guys. Now, I'm going to do two separate segments here. One of them, I'll get into the specific charges against Rudy Giuliani in a new lawsuit by somebody who used to work for him. But before we get to that, I actually want to talk about, honestly, what is more important, because it has more widespread ramifications, which is, in this lawsuit, Rudy Giuliani's former employee alleges that he openly said, casual conversation, that him and Trump were selling pardons for $2 million each. They were selling pardons for $2 million each, and they would basically split the money. So Rudy would take $1 million, Trump would take $1 million, and people are supposed to go to Rudy Giuliani through a back channel, so it's not, officially recorded in the presidential records, so that they can make it happen. Okay? Now, again, I'm going to do a separate segment. We'll get to the sexual assault allegations that are against Rudy Giuliani. But first, I want to get to this part. Dunphy alleged in her suit, that's the name of the employee, Dunphy alleged in her suit that Giuliani talked about presidential pardons. She said Giuliani claimed to have immunity and told her that he was selling pardons for $2 million, which he and President Trump would split. The lawsuit did not suggest any pardons were sold. Okay, now I'm going to get back to more on that in a second. But Trump did a lot of pardons, especially at the end of his time in office. And there it really is an open question. A lot of there were quite a number of famous people who ended up being pardoned. People from the rap community, for example. And it's like, how did this get in front of Trump? And why did he care? And why did he take the time to do it? It's a lot of question mark. There absolutely needs to be an investigation over this. Justin Kelton, Dunphy's attorney, said on MSNBC that there is not a recording of the pardon conversation. Quote, "We do expect that it will be corroborated in other ways." He noted that the complaint alleges that another person was present for that conversation, who Kelton said was Lev Parnas, a Giuliani associate, and that Dunphy's attorneys would like to speak to Parnas about it. A spokesperson for former President Donald Trump's 2024 campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the lawsuit. So, there are apparently dozens and dozens of recordings of a lot of the claims that this woman is making vis-a-vis Giuliani. But this conversation was not recorded, but she says it's okay. There was a third person in the room, and basically he can vouch to this being the case. Now, will he? Do his loyalties lie with Giuliani? I don't know. That's yet to be seen. But needless to say, there absolutely should be an investigation into this. I mean, this is a reason enough to do an investigation, and then if you were to dig deeper, maybe the authorities get access to Giuliani's business records and his bank accounts, and then you could potentially see any strange payments around the time of a bunch of the pardons. You could track where the money comes from, et cetera, et cetera. So they go on to say, hours before he left office in 2021, Trump pardoned 74 people and commuted the sentences of 70 others. Giuliani, who has denied the allegations that he sought a pardon himself, told Dunphy that she could refer pardon seekers to him so long as they did not go through, quote, the normal channels of the Office of the Pardon Attorney, because they would be subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act, according to the lawsuit. Dunphy also alleged that Giuliani provided a glimpse into plans to overturn the election if Trump lost, telling her, quote, that Trump's team would claim there was voter fraud and that Trump had actually won the election, the lawsuit claims. So look, if that part of it is true, then they knew every step of the way, we're lying on purpose, and that's fine because we want to reach our end goal of keeping Trump in office. That would be quite a fact, wouldn't it? If they knew all along. Like, it's one thing if you're a true believer. Like, I've given this example before, but Jeanine Pirro, who's spreading the rigged election stuff, I think she's dumb enough to believe it. And so that actually changes the level of culpability, right? Like, if you're making the arguments and you know it's false, but you're doing it on purpose, then, Dominion, Smartmatic, they have a case against you, right? You're knowingly lying in a malicious way. Like, you have ill intent in that scenario. For if you believe it, the ill intent is not necessarily there. You're just an idiot, right? And you drank the Kool-Aid. If this is true, then Giuliani knew, and he was like, we're just lying on purpose, and we're fine with lying. We're morally okay with lying. But again, they need to do an investigation in this, because this is a huge deal if true. Because I would imagine, even in our backwards, crazy system, where corruption is not considered corruption unless there's literally a smoke-filled back room with a quid pro quo where people are saying to each other, will you do this crime for me? Here is some money. Well, yes, I would love to do that crime for you. Like, that's what the Supreme Court needs in order for them to be like, okay, there's a problem. Anything short of that, they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. There's no problem here. I see no issue whatsoever. But this is, if they were to prove this, that this is a huge deal, man. This would actually be illegal. It's flat out pay-to-play corruption. And look, on its face, what do I think? I think it's probably true, right? Now, you need more evidence. You can't just take this woman's word for it. And we'll wait and see if evidence comes out. But an investigation absolutely should be launched because you know what? This sounds exactly like Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. They're scumbags. They've always been scumbags. They don't think the rules apply to them. So, look, we have to reserve judgment until we get more evidence and there is an investigation. But to me, this is a gigantic deal. This is a big deal. And certainly the charge should be taken seriously because it just sounds like them, right? We know how scummy they've been throughout all these years. Everybody knows it. Donald Trump has been a corrupt businessman from day one. He was in real estate in New York City in the 1980s. You think he doesn't have mob connections? His lawyer for years was the mafia's top lawyer. Of course he's got these mafia connections. Of course he's been involved in money laundering and all sorts of business sketchy stuff. So this, I mean, it's sort of unsurprising, but it's also a colossal bombshell. So let's see what comes of it. But this is quite a claim. And this is probably, we'll get to the Giuliani sexual assault stuff in a second. But this, in terms of legal ramifications, if there is an investigation and this is true, then it would be a huge deal and there would be consequences for it. But as we've seen with Trump time and time and time again, the dude has more than 9 lives, right? He gets his way out of everything, seemingly. So I won't hold my breath for it, but it certainly sounds like them. You know, this is the same guy whose son-in-law was working in the White House, and then, oh, would you look at that? Later on, he took $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. That's not sketchy. I'm sure there weren't favors being done on a regular basis behind the scenes, vis-a-vis the people who were paying you off and you knew were going to give you a big payday. And that's the thing, right? Like, you want to beat up on Hunter Biden, by all means, go right ahead. Do it all day long. I wouldn't touch the sex addiction and crack addiction stuff, because that's whatever, right? You want to go after, you know, financial corruption? I'm right there with you. But anybody on the right who brings up Hunter Biden and doesn't say a word about Jared Kushner, total hacks. Total hacks. And Trump himself, he's taken all this money from Saudi Arabia for this live golf tour. They're having events at his courses. I'm sure he's getting paid tens of millions, if not more, by the Saudi government. Again, you think there's not pay to play going on? Of course there's pay to play going on here. In the same way, look, I was here to tell you guys early on, even when it's unpopular in left-wing circles or liberal circles, that the Clinton Foundation is super sketchy. Super sketchy. You should not be doing international business in any way, shape, or form, even if it's under the guise of charity, when you're somebody who's Secretary of State or you have a position of power in the federal government. Shouldn't be doing it. Sketchy when that happens. It's also sketchy when it happens with Donald Trump. And it's unacceptable. And so we'll see what comes of this investigation, but it is a big deal. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.